Quick background about Tariq. As we had mentioned before, Tariq was the second engineer. After CTO, he was hired of a company called AppLovin, which right before COVID went public. Tariq is also one of the first investors at Headstarter, and he, just like many of us, was a CS major not too long ago. And so I am super stoked to introduce Tariq. So Tariq, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, man. Thank you so much. You were saying CS major not too long ago. It was a long ago. I think probably 2005 or 2006. So that's 17 years ago, actually. But yeah, love what these guys are doing. Yasin had me, asked me to talk and just talk about my experiences and just my journey into CS. And so it's an interesting one because it's a lot different than where the world is now. I think back to the 90s, actually. I was in high school in the 90s and 1997, 98, probably a freshman in high school. So just a little bit, the internet was big, becoming big, mainstream, 95, 96. And so, being a part of that, it was just a whole new world. And so obviously being that early in the internet revolution, you don't have that much access to resources, right? Like what is CS? What are the type of jobs out there? What's the right path? And so luckily, I was a Bay Area native. And so that kind of helped me. A fun fact, I didn't really even have a computer until middle of high school. So before having a computer, I had an electronic typewriter and I just started typing, trying to write essays and I had to do the white. It was mainly because I couldn't afford it, but luckily 10th grade, 11th grade, I was able to build my own computer. And, back then being into computers, for me at least, it was a necessity that led to curiosity, but also being in this environment, the Bay Area, kind of helped nurture me and find the right path. But yeah, going back to just that time, there weren't many resources. I remember my dad and some uncles telling me, hey, you need to get into Java. And I was like, okay, Java. So I just go on the internet and search Java. And I was like, oh, okay, seems like this is where Java is. And here, this is how you download it. I would download it. I download this files and said Java Beans. Click on it. Doesn't work. And so I'm so early in this, I didn't even know what any of this was, what compiling was. And so I just kind of gave up on it, right? And so the only route that I really had was just going on a 4-year degree college, right? This is my path to computer science. And obviously I had the curiosity. My curiosity was just because out of necessity. And I finally got a computer, which was really cool. And that kind of led me to it. So the path was then just get a 4-year degree, learn computer science that way, right? The typical data structures, algorithms, networking, you name it. Back then we didn't even have any mobile classes. And so that was the route I took. And from there, I ended up working in a startup, a very early startup. It was one of those things where my friend, I met him in college. He had an idea for this event management platform back in 2007 or 8. And so he was like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. You want to jump in and try to build this stuff together? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so yeah, we went at it for a year and a half, 2 years. And, it didn't take off. The financial industry back then, there was the financial crash of 2008, 2009. And so, but, I learned a lot. Yasin talks about a lot of the mistakes that you make and a lot of the things that you learn. And, at that moment, you think of it as a failure, but in reality, that year and a half, I learned so much, and looking back, when I look back at when we closed down that startup, I had a chance to compare it to how much I learned in college to how much I learned in those 2 years. And man, the difference was just incredible. And, that really got me understanding. You learn so much more when you're out there on the field. Definitely compared to college. Don't get me wrong, college is just great too. It's a great avenue. And for me, that was the only avenue and it did me well. But then, getting a chance to finally get into the field and actually partaking in building a product, talking to people, being in there. I was forced to be that early. I was forced to having to take on other roles, right? Roles that you're not really used to, which is like talking to non-engineers, right? Talking business, talking to people to get interest in our product. And so those are things that I wasn't good at. And so I learned on the spot. And so, even though the company wasn't successful at the end of it all, there were so many things I was able to put under my belt as a tool or skill that I was very confident to go on later and find a job somewhere else. And I was able to get a job at this online privacy company called Reputation Defender. And, it was a different startup. It was about 100, 150 people at the time. And so at that time, it was, it was a different pace, more people. And, when you have more people, there's a lot more interaction, communication, hierarchy, organized org charts, whatever you want to call it. And so in that setting, you really have to understand as an engineer that it's not just about the software, right? Coding. It's all about convincing a product guy or a product manager or a biz guy, hey, we can't have these features or like we can't do that, right? Hey, there's a deadline. We got to like push back on certain things. So there's a lot of like, things beyond coding that I had to learn, right? Because you have your manager and your manager has to vouch for you and you have to vouch for yourself, right? There's things where I have to learn, which is like, hey, I'm doing all of these things. I'm bringing in results, but I have to show myself. I have to show my manager I'm doing all these things. Otherwise, he might not see me. And I have to understand, look, we might not even have good managers, right? Good managers kind of dictates how well you can move up in your career. And so it all comes down to communication for me when I realize that, hey, speak up for myself and don't, if you're doing something, speak out about it and say, hey, I did this, right? So your manager knows about it. He can be like, oh, okay, cool, I didn't know that. And so, the theme here is like beyond the software, beyond the coding that, you can learn along the way. I learned all of these other like soft skills and those end up becoming very important. But like one of the other things I realized in this particular company is really, I kind of touched on this. One of them, what's really important is like who your manager is also, right? And so, because your manager can really dictate the trajectory of where you're going to be, right? If your manager wants to, harbor you and nurture you and make sure you succeed, then you're going to have a great, long-term, career path that's successful. Otherwise, you can be stagnant. And so, I was there for like 2 years, and then after that, I went to a company called AppLovin, and I was the second guy. And the interesting thing about this company was that there were three founders, and these three founders had successfully sold or exited companies before, and so it was a whole different experience because now it's like I'm under this under this team that has done it before. And I was like, okay, so now I know this is what it takes to actually make something successful. And so, I go from something that was just purely me and like 2-3 guys and, we crashed, but we learned so much. Going to a company that's, I'm kind of understanding like what a somewhat mid-sized level startup is. And, I didn't bring this up, but I ended up kind of working on an island in that company where I wasn't able to grow because there was no one there as a senior level to just help me or for me to like really learn what they would do, right? And so that's one of the things if you want to like get advice is make sure when you're applying for a job or looking at a particular company, just make sure like you talk to the managers and say, hey, like what are you going to do for me? Like how are you going to help me? This is my long-term goal. How are you going to help me get to that point, right? Because that's going to be very important in your career. Because your manager can really dictate if you're going to stagnate, stall, whatever you want to call it, or grow as an individual, and also obviously move up in your career. So I learned these different things, and now I was in this position where I was under these founders who built successful companies, and they know how to run a company, they know who to hire properly, and I was able to learn from them, and I was able to grow from being just a regular software engineer to a senior to principal director, and that was like a 10 to 12 year run, and we exited actually kind of I think 2021 or 2020. It seems it's not that far ago, but it seems like it's seems still pretty recent. But yeah, that was kind of like a quick journey of where I went, where I was.